Just continue with the theme of energy, but take a look at this. The Chinese government is offering South Africa solar panels and generators to help deal with the current power crisis. The offer will be for equipment to be installed at public institutions. Eskom will also be assisted with renewable energy equipment. We're now joined by Adil Nchabeleng, an energy expert, to unpack this. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Maybe let's start with an understanding of China's energy security. What does it look like?
In terms of China's energy security, they have the largest security with regards to the most installed capacity in the world, with regards to solar as well as wind turbines, and they are the largest manufacturers in the world of solar technology. So China is by far one of the best, one of the largest manufacturers in the world, and they are importing across the whole world with regards to their solar panels as well as technology on wind turbines and wind technology.
Sure. And how then should we understand this collaboration with South Africa?
Look, I don't know how they are formulating the collaboration. The minister is going on a bilateral visit whereby he is going to be literally focusing on talking to the Chinese government to assist, one, ensuring that there could be proper imports brought into South Africa. It can be done speedily. On top of it, there could be an aspect of assisting South Africans because there's a huge demand, but cost is not coming down. The aspect of bringing in the technology is delayed. There's a huge shortage of inverters in the country as we're speaking. On top of it, battery packages. And the cost of it is so exorbitant and inhibitive that you're not going to have the transition that is actually aimed at happen speedily. Just purely because of we are not a destination manufacturer. South Africa doesn't manufacture any of the panels, technology, doesn't do the refinery process, doesn't do the technology. So we literally importing everything into South Africa, from the technology to the software and everything. The only jobs created locally will be the installers. So that collaboration will assist to alleviate the problem. And again, help people who want to literally be less and less dependent on Eskom.
Could it be better, especially the collaboration between South Africa and China? There's an interesting documentary by Bloomberg online titled How China Plans to Win the Future of Energy. And you take a look at some of their plans. I mean, for 2030, right up until 2060, where they plan to have zero emissions, right? And go fully on solar, hydropower plants and wind installation. So they already have a plan, and they are also factoring in the industries that they have in that country. With what you said of us importing, is it not time for us, because a lot is also being said about industrialization in this country, to actually set up those factories, skills transfer here and there, and we actually produce it in the country while addressing the job crisis?
I would have expected that when we drawn up the IRP 19, out of the IRP it tells you, for instance, the 17,000 megawatts of wind technology. There's 11,000 megawatts to 12,000 megawatts of solar panel. There's about 8,000 megawatts of gas allocation. Out of those streams alone, there's a huge value chain for industrialization. So I would have expected by now, government, DTI, including the Department of Minerals and Energy, now the new Minister of Electricity, they would have sat with the plan and said, listen, if we are to do skills transfer, we are to do skills development, we are to do aspect of improving our economy, which is at its lackluster stage right now. We're not growing. We're at a 1.6% growth rate fixed for the next 3 years to 5 years, which is a terrible growth. Nobody in the world is growing though. So they should have just taken those 3 streams, prioritized them for localization. Whoever wants to supply, tell them the condition for this particular program will be on the local basis. You bring in your equipment, you bring in your technology, set up the factory, we provide you with the skills, we provide you with the incentives, and you produce locally. To produce, for instance, solar wafers is the technology that is coming out of South Africa anyway. We're doing refinery of solar wafer in an ingot format. Most people don't know yet that we're actually doing refinery of this process, but we are not refining it to the last stages. There's a 0.8% that is required out of that ingot in order to make it, a crystal level of a solar panel ready, which South Africa doesn't do. We just do the aspect of ensuring that we can do the, 96.6% of the refining process on the smelting side of it. But we don't complete the process, which means the highest value, which is over 1,000% of value addition is taken overseas, and it brings back to South Africa, and we pay a high fortune for it. So there's certain things about our decision-making that doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Partnership should exist where manufacturers should come from South Africa. It's an ideal environment. The climate is perfect. We've got areas where you can set up these factories, and we've got areas that are already doing high level in terms of, refinery process in South Africa and smelting.
Sure. What is ingot format? Is that the refining?
It's an ingot, yeah. It comes like this. An ingot is like almost a cake size of a highly refined, what they would call a, a crystal solar panel, crystal UV photovoltaic, which is ready in a stage to be cut, to be finalized, and after it's finalized, they produce a full-on panel whereby it can be cut into the size that is actually produced in. And that is why you need that highest level of purity. South Africa smelts as well as refines to the level where it does not reach the highest level of spec purity, but you use the most energy to do it. So we are doing the hardest work, passing it over for somebody to just finish the last stage of it, which is a 0.8% to finish it off. They get the full value of the over 1,000%, marginal increase on it. So there are certain things we haven't done right. I know this because we have already done work over the previous 10 years on preparing the green transition and understanding where we can bring in industrialization. Sure. Most certainly, we can compete with China as South Africa on the cost, on the labor, as well as on the pricing part of it. And we can become an export destination for the solar wafer technology, as well as solar panels, including the wind, as well as the wind generator technology, which is the motors that goes inside the windmills, as well as the wind turbines.
And so in whose interest is it, or in whose interest is it that things do not change? As I understand it from this documentary, China also relies on coal, right? And they've given themselves a specific timeline to get off of the grid and raise some 1.2 terawatts in wind and solar energy, for instance, by 2030. And come 2060, then we're talking a whole new ball game when they'll be able to be so powered up. And so in whose interest is it that we are, because it also comes down to this just energy transition, where some sectors of society are saying, why are we rushing with this thing? Where are we going with it when we are not even set up to be on step 2, step 10?
Exactly. I mean, from my point of view, it takes 30 years to do a just energy transition. South Africa wants to complete it in 5 years, which doesn't make sense, which means you have to collapse everything you have in order to be at net zero. No coal, no any pollutant in terms of fossil fuel, which is either diesel or petrol or whatever they have to use to burn and create the current electricity. Coal, fossil fuel and everything. So if you have a net zero objective, like in South Africa, we are the signatories of the Paris Accord and the transition part of it, we have to stage it for 30 years minimum in phases and processes, like how we've said it in the IRP. The IRP says clearly that there will be 30% of integrated renewable energy into the system. We will then do an energy mix of remaining with 60% coal, and then the balance of it should be split into gas, nuclear, as well as other, fossil fuel, biofuel, or whatever it is. And in there, you are able to create, with regards to this particular mixed energy plan that we have in South Africa. And in it, by the way, it's all industrial opportunities. It was not just to say we need this. The reason why we're stuck with coal is because it's abundant and it's cheap. And the part of it is it was created during apartheid to create the abundance of coal and using that coal for all industrial applications. Steel, creating cement out of it, creating industrialization out of it, building and everything, building materials and everything, making sure that out of the coal you can create petroleums, synthetic fuels, on top of it the crude oil that we needed. So it was a multi-purpose industrial application. And that is why we got stuck with it. And the cheap coal that we're using it for power stations in order to create our generation of electricity. So it was achieved. That is why we had the best in terms of infrastructure of electricity. Now in the transition age and everything, to transition from there, for instance, China has over, I think, 100,000 megawatts of current available renewable sources. But in terms of the China's population and land mass, 100,000 megawatts plus, so I think it's about 124 to 34,000 megawatts of renewables. It means nothing because they are sitting with 800,000 megawatts of coal alone in their system. And they have over amount of about a billion megawatts of electricity generation. So the scale is not the same. We are only sitting at 50,000 megawatts in South Africa. So when you start looking at the fundamentals of this electricity generation, you realize we are still far. But we have an opportunity. If the minister goes to China, his priority to say, we are unlocking this program. We don't want to be importing our rands and cents. We want to create jobs opportunity, at the same time share in the dividend of this industrialization process. So the jobs we were supposed to be creating, we cannot be sending them off to China. Bring the industries here. Let there be a partnership to create the solar plants, to create the inverter technology, to create the battery parks, and to create the technology in terms of the cable harnessing and everything in South Africa. And you've got a whole industrialization program. It takes us up. It gives us about a 2% GDP growth addition to the current 1% which we're stuck with. So you have a complete different set of circumstances on an energy just transition level. It is encouraging, and there could be social programs, for instance, where government can throw in incentives for people to uptake these locally produced products.
If wishes were horses. Thank you very much, Adil Nchabeleng, an energy expert.